So just looking at a potential home network, just so you get an idea of it. Here we've got an NBN over here on a single IP address, which is how it addresses things into your network. And it comes in through a modem, and in an NBN sense, this could be that little black box with 4 green lights on it, would be the NBN modem. And then it goes through this SPI firewall and then into a router, which then does the communication with all the devices in your home, which could be fixed PCs on Ethernet. These blue lines are Ethernet cables, or it could be via a wireless Wi-Fi connection. This is a wireless access point coming off here. And that comes off the router. So you might have, I have something like 40 devices coming off that router. Each of these devices internally in your home has a different address range. You can see here the router's main address is 192.168.01, and then it allocates addresses 2, 3, 4, and 5, and for any new device, phone or camera or whatever it might be, this router will allocate another one of the addresses in this range. And the reason it does this is then it saves all these extra addresses from being additional to the main IP address, because globally we're running out of these addresses. And so if every device in your home needed one of these addresses, would have run out a long time ago. So this has been happening for ages, this readdressing, or what's called NAT, number address translation, has been occurring, and the router looks after all of that. It allocates these internal addresses and does the number translation as well. So, you know, you've got to be just a bit aware too of your wireless security. These are all secure because it's Ethernet cable. No one can really tap into those. But obviously the wireless access could reach well out into the street or to your neighbours. And so you need to have a password on this Wi-Fi, and this is that card that comes with the router that shows what's called the SSID. The Wi-Fi name is called the SSID, ID being identifier, and then the password is what you have to put in if you want to connect a new Wi-Fi device or give some guest access to your Wi-Fi and so on. So that's just a bit about home network. And going a bit further with that Wi-Fi security, not to be confused with a wireless internet. Some people in the outer suburbs of Sydney provided their internet via wireless internet. And this is not the same as Wi-Fi. This is wireless internet coming from the mobile towers, and more or less using the same Wi-Fi access as your mobile phone uses to do data-orientated applications. So it's usually only people who are travelling or who are on the outskirts of Sydney and the NBN network doesn't go far enough that would be on a wireless internet connection. Wireless internet uses a dongle with a SIM card. Remember, a SIM card is what's in your phone, and it connects to the phone microwave tower. So this is secured in the same way as mobile phone. Connection is to the nearest mobile tower, the capacity. Wi-Fi is what's within your home, and is your network, and it operates on a standard called 802.11. and various versions. We're now at version AC. All that's happened in these versions is they got faster and faster, so they all just operate. Now, many of the routers, Wi-Fi routers, started, or they all started at 2.4 gigahertz band, radio band, which is the same band that microwaves use, baby monitors use, garage doors use, cordless phones use, and that 2.4 gigahertz band is now getting very busy with so many devices. So recently they introduced a 5 gigahertz band. So you'll find most routers now provide what's called dual band. You can either connect at 2.4 or 5. Unfortunately, not all devices can handle 5 gigahertz because it's only the more modern devices that can do that. Your Wi-Fi range can be up to 50 plus meters, so you've got to think about your neighbors. The range is higher for 2.4 gigahertz than it is for 5. The higher the frequency, the more it's attenuated by passing through walls, floors, doors, windows, etc. So 2.4 gigahertz will go further, but it is pretty crowded, and hence why they brought in another band to share the load a bit. But be aware that it can go a good way. So you need to be secured, otherwise your neighbours will be using your internet free of charge. You can connect to a laptop, tablet, smartphone, and your home needs to be secured by settings in your Wi-Fi router. You normally set a Wi-Fi network identifier plus the WPA pre-shared key encryption is the key that you type in. And the device holds that key indefinitely. But it is good to remember that if your router fails for any particular reason, the router that's providing the Wi-Fi, people often forget that it sometimes gets blown up in a thunderstorm and you have to get a new one from Telstra or Optus or whatever because it's no longer working. And when you get the new one, you will have to change the Wi-Fi passwords in all your devices because the new one will come pre-programmed with a completely different Wi-Fi password. So often people forget that that's what they have to do. It's not just a matter of plugging it in, they've got to reprogram all their devices once only until they know the new password. So, do's and don'ts, final part of this section, is the things you should do and the things you shouldn't do. So the do's are regularly back up important documents and photos. Can't overemphasize the importance of backups because they can save the day in so many situations. Check that the Windows operating system and MS Office are up to date because that's what all these security patches are around, is stopping people allowing them to run malicious software that's going to cause you problems. So when a weakness or an opening is found in Windows or Windows Office, then they issue a patch, a security patch that closes that opportunity. And the same goes for anything else that's talking on the internet, anything like Adobe Reader and other network-based apps that you use. For example, browsers is obviously the main internet-facing app. So use a good resident virus scanner that is updated daily. Use a firewall to prevent anyone accessing in or out from your PC. Make sure that your router Wi-Fi is properly secured. Only use your own bookmarks for critical websites. Critical websites are things like your banks or your super fund. Look for a padlock icon in the browser's status bar, which in the past has always indicated that padlock at the left of the address bar shows that the connection is encrypted. In other words, it's running at HTTPS, not HTTP. The S stands for secure. Be suspicious of any and all email attachments. If you don't know what it is, delete it. If it's important enough, they'll contact you again. Same with anything on emails. If you're not sure what it is or who it came from or it looks in any way suspicious, just delete it. Use strong, not obvious passwords, letters and numbers, and in particular, be conscious of your email password is very important, because often other passwords are reset by the company, whoever the password is you're resetting it, sends you an email with instructions of how to reset the password. So if your email's compromised, it can be that everything else gets compromised. When I mean compromised, I mean someone else has access to your email. So then they can go to any other thing that you've had, your super fund or your bank, and say, I've lost my password, can you send a reset or allow me to reset? And of course, they'll send it to your email address in a lot of cases. And if they've got access to that, they can reset it themselves. So that's an obvious thing. The don'ts on the other side of it, don't store sensitive passwords on the side of your PC, because if you get broken into, then they've got those passwords for your bank and everything else. Do store sensitive passwords. Don't store sensitive passwords in browsers. This is an interesting one, because browsers for quite a while now have offered to save you passwords so they can autofill them the next time you visit that site. And I would have said in the past, never ever let a browser store a password at all, sensitive or otherwise. But these days they have made their password storage much more secure, but I still wouldn't trust it with sensitive passwords. What I mean by sensitive passwords is passwords for your bank or your super fund or your stock market portfolio. Non-sensitive passwords are those for Bunnings or Pizza Hut or other trivial sites that you may still access, but is unlikely to end in someone clearing out your bank accounts or your super fund. So for less sensitive passwords, you might use a Google Chrome's password storage, and it is handy because it will put it back in next time you visit that site, like eBay or whatever. But sensitive passwords, no, don't risk them in a browser storage. Occasionally, I've found that on another person's machine, I can get into their password storage in the browser when I shouldn't have been able to. Normally these days they ask for the Gmail password, for example, in the case of Google Chrome. You wouldn't get access to the stored passwords without putting in your Gmail password. But sometimes it does go in without asking you for that. So if you've lent your machine or put a machine to be repaired, it is possible that someone could access these passwords. Hence, don't put any sensitive passwords in there. Don't use the same passwords for multiple sensitive sites. So don't use the same password for your bank, your super fund, and your stock portfolio. Because if they can get into one and they know you've got the others, they've obviously got access to the others as well. So don't use the same password for multiple sensitive sites. Never ever click on links provided in unsolicited emails. And never click stay signed in on a PC other than your own. For example, if you were in a flight deck lounge and you accessed a public machine, you wouldn't want to click on stay signed in, because when you leave that machine, the next person coming along will be straight into your inbox. So be careful about ever saying stay signed in. It should only be on devices you own. Check passwords stored in your browsers. This is how you can do it. It is for nearly up-to-date versions of Chrome, Firefox and Microsoft Edge. They're all running at time of print at 111, version 111. And that is how you get to the stored passwords. So you should check any passwords you have inadvertently stored there and make sure that they, if they are sensitive ones, that you remove them. You can just say delete to make sure that sensitive passwords aren't being held there and possibly accessible to other parties. Okay, the last section of this course is on routine maintenance and what you should be doing to keep your machine running as good as you can and also as secure as far as your data is concerned. And to me, the most important thing to be doing on a regular basis is backing up your personal data as a minimum. You might choose to do the whole machine, but as a minimum, you should be backing up your personal data, things like your documents and your photos and so on. So we're going to look at the backups first as being the most important task. So the first thing, as we said earlier, you've got to decide what you're going to back up. This could be a selection of your documents and spreadsheets, and it could include your emails or not. Or you might decide to, hey, I can't make my mind up what to back up. I'm just going to go and do the whole machine and do a disk image, which has the benefits of backing up your operating system and all the installed programs. After that, you've got to decide where you're going to back up to, what sort of media are you going to use, and you might use DVDs, you might use USB drives, or you might use an external drive. So again, depending on the size, you've got to think about which one you're going to do. And then you've got to decide, how often am I going to do this? Am I going to do it every month? Am I going to do it every 6 months? Or something in between? And the first two of these decisions will help determine the method, because if you're going to do a disk backup, then you'll need an external hard drive to do it. If you're only going to do certain documents, you might decide to do it on a USB flash drive, a thumb drive, whatever you want to call it. So once you make these decisions, it will determine probably the media and the method. So the method, the first one I'll look at, is to burn chosen folders to a DVD. Assuming this is, of course, whatever PC you've got has a DVD drive. A lot of the new laptops don't have DVD drives, so you may not be able to do this anyway. Method 2 will look at chosen folders as before, but this time just doing it to an external hard drive or doing it to a flash drive, depending on the volume. And method 3 is to create a disk image back up to an external drive. So we'll just look at these 3 methods quickly. So taking method 1, what the process is you've got to select the folders you want to be burnt to a DVD. And then you insert a DVD into the DVD drive. You select the folders using Control key and clicking on each folder. And then you right-click one of those folders and left-click Properties to just see what the total size is and whether it's going to fit on your DVD. Having done that, you can again right-click on one of the selected folders and you send it to the DVD drive. Having got that, a little window will open up and you'll title the disk that you're going to burn. It might be with the date, and something that describes which folders this includes and so on, just to make it easier. And then you select CD DVD player as one of the options and click next to burn the disk, and then next. Remove the disk and then label it, physically label the disk. You can either put it in an envelope and label it, or you can actually write with an indelible marker on the disk itself. So we're just going to run through this process so you can see basically how easy it is if you've got a disk to burn. So we're going to go to the desktop, and I'm going to go, because I've said before, this machine doesn't have a lot of data on it. So I've just created some dummy folders in the music area of this machine. So in music, in my personal data, I've just created these folders with some data in it just to play with. But it could be folders in any folder anywhere on the machine, so it's really irrelevant which folders you're picking to back up. But just suppose we wanted to back up folder A, and we click folder A, and if you wanted to back up folder C, you would hold control key down and click on C, and then still holding that control key down, click on folder E. And that way you've highlighted these three folders. And now, just to check that this the size of the contents of these is not going to be too much, if you right click any of them and then left click properties, you'll see that the total is 543 files and 95 folders, and it's just over a gigabyte. So as long as we've got a gigabyte free, then we can put this onto it. Now, if it was a USB drive, you would just check that you've got enough space. If it's a DVD drive, it's got to be less than 4.7 gigabytes, which this obviously is. So now we know the size is going to be okay for DVD. We can close that, and you can right click it again, right click any of them again, and this time say send to, and you send to DVD drive. And when I do that, it's realized that there's no blank disk in the drive, so it's telling me to insert a disk. Now, I've got one ready to go. It's just been sitting in the tray, so I'll just push that in now, and giving it a little moment to think about it and to read the disk, it should take that notification away and give me this little window here. And in this, it shows to burn a disk. How do you want to use this disk? Now, in this, where it's highlighted May the 5th, 2023, you can overwrite that with a title of your own, or you can leave it with the date. It's up to you. But what you do need to do is change to with a CD DVD player. So move the selection down to here. This means that what it will do is it will burn the files and close it, so that there is no danger of the files being deleted or corrupted or changed in any way. So you want to select with a DVD player, which has mastered. And then all you do is hit next. Now, I won't do it because it'll just waste a blank DVD, but that's all you've got to do is hit next, and it'll start burning the DVD. So we'll leave it at that, so I'll just cancel out, but that's the process that you're going to use. So we'll now go back to the presentation, and that's what I've just run through method 1. So if we now go to method 2, which is not that's different really. Method 2, you select the folders to be copied. Select the folder's control key and click on each, as we did before. Right-click one of them and click on Properties. Check the total size will fit on your USB or external drive. Now, USBs come in all sorts of sizes, anything from a couple of gigabytes these days to 64 gigabytes. So it just depends on the size of your drive as to how much and how many folders you'll be able to include. So you insert the USB or external drive, and I think it's a good idea to create a backup folder. You may have other things on this drive, and that doesn't matter. You can have any amount of data as long as there's enough spare data to put your backup on there. But it's so that you know where to find it again. It's easier if you just create a backup folder, and I'll do that in the demonstration. And right-click one of the selected folders and click Copy. So whereas before you did a Send To, this time you just do a click Copy. And then we open the created backup folder on the external drive and place a cursor in the blank space and click right-click Paste. So you're just doing a copy and paste of the selected folders. Okay, so that we won't go on to that in a moment. We'll go back to the desktop, and these were the folders, if you remember, that we were going to copy, or we copied to a DVD or burnt to a DVD. This time we're going to put it to a USB drive that's plugged into the machine. So with these folders, I tend to leave the folders I'm going to do there, and I'll open another file explorer. But because it's a USB drive that's plugged in, I'll go to this PC, and down here you'll see that this is the USB drive I'm going to place the backup on. So you can see there's plenty of space. There's 6.61 gigabytes free. So if I open that, and as you can see, there's plenty of other stuff on there. So what I will do is I'll just right-click anywhere in blank space and say New, and then Folder. And in that folder, I'll call it Backup. And what I tend to add on to it is that I put the date backwards, so 23/05/05 is today's date. So I hit enter on that, and if I put refresh, it'll bring it up to the top with the other folders. So there you've got backup 23/05/05. And the following backup you do, which might be in a month or 3 months or 6 months time, you're going to put the date on that. Now, by writing the dates backwards like this, they'll always increase downwards. So they'll all be in the order. So if you have another folder and another backup folder and another backup folder, the oldest will always be at the top, and the newest will always be at the bottom of the backup folders. So that way it's easy to delete the old, really old ones once you've got 3 or 4 stored there. So if I go into this, if I open it, you can see it's blank because there's nothing on it. So we now just get the backup folders we want. So like we say, we right-click any of them, right-click, and then go to Copy. And it's going to copy all 3 of the highlighted folders. So if I click Copy, and then I go over here, and in any blank space in here, I right-click and say Paste, Paste. And you'll see it copy it over. So this will take a little bit of time because it's I've put some dummy data in it. And so it will take time to write it to the flash drive. So I might just pause there and let it come back, and I'll just come back to you when it's a bit further on. Okay, so it's nearly finished backing these folders up. As you can see, the green line is nearly at the end. When it does finish, we'll just make a final check that it has copied the files perfectly. And you can do this very easily by comparing the properties of the original files with the properties of the new copy. So once this is finished, it's at 90, 98, 99, and it's just about to finish. And then we'll check that the copy has been made. So as you can see, it's now changed. These are now highlighted in blue, so we can right-click that group, and we can have a look at that one, and we can right-click this one and have a look at that one. And as you can see, it's got 543 files in 95 folders and 543 files in 95 folders, exactly the same 1.01 gigabytes. And even to the byte, 779 is the last three digits, and it's 779 over here too. So you know that the copy is complete and you're backed up now. So we can close that, we can close that, and you can see now that you have got these folders backed up on your external media, whatever it be. Okay, so you would come back in another month or 3 months and create a new folder back up with whatever date you were on then, and do the same thing. All right, so we'll now go back to the presentation, and we'll have a look at backup method 3. Now this one is the one that you must have an external drive for, because you need it for the size. And you need appropriate imaging software. If you remember, I didn't necessarily recommend the one that comes with the drive itself. I would use something more standard, something that you know how it works, you get used to, and the thing is, it sort of would be recognized by other people, by people who might be repairing your machine or restoring this backup. So Macri and Reflect or Free AOMI are recommended. The exact process to do this depends on the actual imaging software. Obviously, they're all a bit different. But what I will do is just show you the basics of using Macri and Reflect, and they're all basically the same. They're both all doing the same thing. You've basically got to select the partitions you want to back up, then you select the destination, and then you set full, not incremental or differential. You want a full backup. So we'll just look at Macri and Reflect in this regard. So if I go back to the desktop, and we'll find that Macri and Reflect is actually on this machine because I use it for other things. So we'll go into here and look under Macrium. Here it is, and we open Macri and Reflect. You have to say yes to allow it to make changes. This is Macri and Reflect 8. And it will eventually open up. Now this is going to be a lot more complicated than it will be on your machine, because this machine has a lot of different disks. But the one you're most interested in is always at the top. And this is the system drive. This is C drive. So if you look closely, you will find that's what it says. So on C drive, there is a number of partitions. This is a partition, so the second partition, third partition, and there's some spare space at the end of the drive. and you'll see that this is C drive. This partition here is your system drive. These two are used by Windows, but you need to back them up as well. So in Macrium Reflect, there's a tick box here that if that's ticked, it means the individuals will be ticked too. And you want to back up all three of these. And the drive that's in question here is the one that has, it's a very faint and I think a poor part of the user interface. It's a faint blue line here, and it's highlighted and it's got image this disk, and it refers to the disk above it. So if I selected the second drive, you'll see that the blue line drops to here, and image this disk has dropped to here. So you do need to just check that you've got the right disk, because this is C drive and you do want to do this. So if I click up here, it will go, the image this disk will go to here. The blue line here just goes to whichever one you're under, but it's image this disk refers to this whole disk here. And if you have multiple disks, you can back them all up, but they have to be done as separate jobs. So on some machines, you might have a 250 gig system drive, and then you may have multiple data drives. And if you want to back up all the drives, you've got to run a job for each of the drives. So if we say image this disk here, it comes up with another window which shows the same drive as up here at the top as the source, and it shows where do you want to put this. So a destination, where are you going to put it? So this is what you're backing up, this is where you're going to back it up to. Well, because this has never been done on here before, it doesn't have anything in here. Quite often it has it already in there. So if we go to this PC, and I know it's not going to fit, but I'm just going to nominate the flash drive that's on there. And it's just going to say I, which is the flash drive name. So, having nominated where it's going to go to, you say next. And on this one, you're just going to say, I want a full backup. I don't want differential, and I don't want it to purge old backups. I don't want it making the decision of what I'm going to purge or not. I just want the full backup. And then you go next, and then this screen here is just summarizing what it's about to do. And if you go finish, it will come up with this final screen which says run the backup now, and save the settings the preferences I've just set, save them in a file for future called my backup. I don't bother saving this because it takes only a minute to do it, and there may be some differences. You may have something plugged into your machine you didn't have plugged in before, so the settings may not be appropriate. So it's easier just to do it individually each time. So you just leave the tick and run this box, and then OK. Now, when I click on OK, it will start the backup. But because the backup's far too big for the flash drive it's sending it to, I won't actually physically do it. But when it starts, it will do some testing to see how fast it can write, and then it will give you an idea of how long the backup will take. It may be 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, or it may be an hour and a half, depending on the contents of the drive and the speed it can write to your external drive. When it's finished, there'll be green lines going across, and when it finishes, it will come up with a little window that says backup image completed successfully. And that's what you must see. You must see that in Macrium Reflect, you must see that it successfully finishes, because if for any reason it can't read from your internal drive, your system drive, it may stop halfway. And that's not a good sign, because it means that Macrium was unable to read the data from the source drive, and you may have problems about to hit. So you need to pursue that if it can't complete successfully. But in most cases, it will just go to the end and it'll say image completed successfully. And once it's done that, you can close Macrium Reflect, and you can disconnect your external drive, put it away somewhere away from your machine, and so on. Here, I will just cancel out from it. All right, so that's how you would do it on Macrium Reflect. That's how you actually, and most of them are very similar. Whether it's AOMI or whatever, they're all working on the basis of what are you trying to back up and where are you backing it up to. Then define what sort of backup, full, differential, or incremental. And then say, okay, off you go, do it. There's not a lot more to it than that. It's just you've got to know what you're looking for. Okay, so let's move on to other general maintenance you should be doing every month. And obviously the next most critical one is to make sure your Microsoft operating system is up to date. Not only the updates that come out regularly monthly, but those should be automatic, but you've also got to check that there is no feature updates waiting to go in. Because remember what I said, that feature updates won't go in automatically because they take such a long time and may require restarts. They leave it to you to decide when to do the feature updates. So you've got to look for that and make sure there's none sitting there waiting to go in. The others should go in anyway. But it's a good idea to manually check this every month or so, that there's no outstanding. So as I've shown you before, you go Start, Settings, Update Security, and check for updates. And complete any updates that come up. Just because it says you're up to date doesn't mean anything. Wait until it's done a check for updates, and then do any updates if any come up. And if it now says you're up to date, you are up to date because you've just done a check. Just be aware that there may be a restart icon in your taskbar icon in the bottom right hand corner. There may be a little orange circle, orange dot on the circle, and also when you go to the power to shut down, they may show an orange dot. And this is just because you've done some updates and it wants to do a restart, in case you missed it on the update screen. All right. As I've said before, optional updates I don't recommend. If the machine's running fine, then there's no need to put yourself more at risk by doing anything optional or preview or whatever it might say. And just a last note, feature updates need to be manually installed. Feature updates can take 10 to 40 minutes or even longer on older machines. It just depends on the age of your machine, the age of the spinning drive in it, and so on. Windows 10 will be updated like this until 2025. So you've got no issues immediately, but of course Windows 11 is where it's going, and then Windows 12. So each operating system is fully supported for 10 years. So since Windows 11 has only been out 3 or 4 years, it's got a much longer time. It will probably go to 2030. I don't know the exact year it runs out. Okay. So then there's other updates, maintenance updates, and you will get these at various times coming up in the bottom right-hand corner. And in most cases, if something says like Macrium Reflect wants to update, you can say affirmative, yes, go ahead and do it. If Adobe reader comes up and says there's an update, you can go ahead and do it. If your virus scanner says there's an update, you can go up and update it. Just a word about virus scanners, because there is a difference between update and upgrade. If you're running a free virus scanner like Avast or AVG, they're always trying to get you to upgrade to the paid for version. And that's an upgrade, which is different from an update. If Avast Free says there's an update available, you can go ahead and do it. It's just updating the program. But don't be lulled into upgrading, because the next thing it'll do is ask for a credit card. So there is a difference between update and upgrade. Browsers need to be checked. Browsers like Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Edge, they all should be kept up to date. And again, it will happen mostly automatically, but it's worthwhile checking because they're the main gateway to the internet and therefore gateway to problems. So check those. Adobe Reader, as I've said. Other installed software will need to be updated, things like your client, if you've got using EM Client or Thunderbird for your emails, they'll want updating now again. And as I've mentioned, Macaron Reflect or AIMI or photo videoing software, any of them could come up and say there is an update available. And as long as it's a product you recognize and it's basically a reputable product, then just say yes, update it, because all of these products are working out on the internet. So if there's a security issue with that product, you do want to close it off. All right, the next issue is maintenance virus scans. It's a good idea to run a full scan of your resident scanner, again, every month or 2 months or whatever. So you first of all go into it. If it's Avast, you go into it first and check that the program itself is up to date and that the database is up to date. And if both of them come back as being up to date, then run a full scan of the PC, not a quick scan, not any other type of scan. If you're going to run a scan, run a full scan. Now, this might take 10, 20 minutes, again, depending on how many files you've got on your machine, but just let it run, go and have dinner or whatever. Then I would do an extra virus scan, choose a second on-demand scanner, something like Malwarebytes, as we've already mentioned. You can put free Malwarebytes on your machine and use it whenever you want to as a double check. So it's not running resident, but it's there as an icon on your desktop, and you can open it and run it whenever you think about it. Again, you can check for database updates in that, and then run a full scan of the system drive at least. And you quarantine anything that's found, and it will do this automatically. All you've got to do is say yes. You quarantine it rather than delete it, because if it did find a false positive, it could be recovered. Okay, maintenance on your hard drive. This is either a spinning drive or an SSD, solid state drive. CC Cleaner, the free version of that, is quite handy for removing old and out of date stuff. Windows makes a lot of temporary files that it uses for a while, and then they just slowly build up and up and up, and they're just not that it's, if you've not got a shortage of space on your disk, it's not really a big issue, but it's still better to clean them out, because it just clogs the system up a bit for it to look through and find things. It's like taking damaged groceries from your larder or things that you don't want anymore. CC Cleaner will only remove the operating system and program temporary files. It will never remove your program, your data, your photos or your documents or spreadsheets. It doesn't go anywhere near those. It's only looking for system-oriented temporary files. You can get CC Cleaner from that link. You install it and run it. It will empty the recycle bin by default, but you can go into options and tell it not to. Just take the tick out of recycle bin. The reason being is the recycle bin is always your second chance to recover anything that you may have accidentally deleted or realized after the event that you shouldn't have deleted it. And you can go into recycle bin and restore it. But once it's been deleted out of recycle bin, there is no way of getting it back. So if you don't want it to empty your recycle bin, you need to switch that off. There used to be a thing called defragmentation on drives, which was really equivalent to putting all the groceries of a particular type together. So you put all your canned vegetables together, you put all your soups together, you put all your cereals together, only because then it's easier to find them than if they're all mixed up and jumbled up. So defragmentation used to take parts of a big file that had become separated due to space on the disk. They put all the parts back together again so that when it starts reading, it doesn't have to jump around the disk to find the parts. It can find them all in one go. And a hard disk, just a point, is a hard disk should have at least 15% free space. There is, I would probably tend towards more 20% these days, but it must have at least 15% free space, which allows it to do the defragmentation, because if it's got to move things around, it copies it into some other space, then it maneuvers this from there to there, and it just juggles it around like playing a jigsaw puzzle. And if it doesn't have sufficient space, it won't be able to defrag. And if it doesn't defrag, it's slowing your machine down. So you do need to have enough space. There is no need to purposely defrag these days. It schedules it. Windows 10 and beyond schedule it every week. So it's one of those housekeeping tasks it's doing in the background. And so you don't need to physically go and tell it to do a defragmentation. Another interesting point is to do, and this is definitely optional. I mean, it's not a necessary, is a system file and data integrity checks. These are commands you run from the command prompt as an administrator. And there's two commands. One is sfc scan now, which checks you. It's a system file check, is what it stands for, system file check. And it will just go through, and it may or may not find any corrupted files and correct them. But now and again, it's well worth running. And the other one is check disk/f, which is more to do with disk integrity problems, where there's a checksum wrong, or it has difficulty reading something, and it will take the time to try and work it out and fix it. So one is a physical check of the disk's integrity, and the other is making sure the system files seem to be correct, system files as they should be. And then we come to nearly the end, which is maintenance associated with the PC itself, whether it be a laptop or a desktop. You need to do some precautions associated with prevention of dust and fluff getting in. The PC towers tend to pull the air in at the front, at the bottom of the front, and blow it out the back, usually out of the power supply. So if you've got the PC tower sitting on the floor, particularly on a carpet, not a good idea to have it running when you're vacuuming that room, because the vacuum raises dust and fluff from carpet, and all the PC's doing is sucking it in and wrapping it around the CPU and so on. So there's at least 2 fans in every desktop PC. one sits on top of the CPU, central processing unit, and one in the power supply unit. And there may also be a case fan. And they all can get very congested. I'll show you some photos of that right now. Okay, so here's a good illustration of a PC that's got a bit clogged up with fluff. You can see down the bottom down here, this is the fan that's sitting on the CPU, and you can see how congested that is. If I blow it up, there's fins, aluminium fins underneath this fan that are now totally blocked from a point of view of air getting to them. And this is a case fan that's also pretty blocked, as you can see. And what happens too is many of these fans get very noisy when they get so blocked. So it is an idea that you need to have it checked or have a look yourself as to how bad it is. In this picture, I've taken the CPU heatsink. This is the aluminium finned heatsink, and the fan is on the other side. And this surface here is what sits on the top of the CPU. That's the CPU right there. That's what you pay a couple of $100 for, which is the central processing unit. And on top of that, there's some paste, like toothpaste, that transmits the heat from this surface through to the bottom of the heatsink down here. And this paste often dries out after 3 or 4 or 5 years. It's running at 70, up to 70 centigrade, and the paste itself dries out and becomes less conductive. And so your processor just gets hotter and hotter underneath this heatsink. And of course, if the fan can't move the air through the heatsink, it gets hot anyway. So in a machine that's 5 or 6 years old, I tend to take the heatsink off and put some new paste in. So I clean it all up, clean up the fans, put it all back, and then it's like a new machine again. So that's worth having a look at. I mean, if you take the cover off the machine onto the desktop, it's usually 2 screws. That's all there is. And I'll just see if there's any other photos. There's the close-up of a power supply. Again, that's the power supply of a unit, and pretty congested with fluff and dirt. There's another example, not quite as bad as the other one. You can actually see the fins of the heatsink, but still, that's bad enough that I would clean it, pull it apart and clean it. So you get the idea. It's not good, worth looking at just to make sure it's all right. If it looks clean, it's fine. Give it another couple of years, but ultimately it will probably need a clean. Okay, so back to the presentation. Like I said, the fans can get pretty clogged up, and they can also get dry bearings, which makes them very noisy. Quite often when you start up, they're noisy for a few minutes, and then they may go quiet as they run up to speed and up to temperature. But any funny noises should be investigated, because a computer shouldn't make any noise in that sense. Just comments on a laptop. As I've said before, a laptop should never be used on your lap. That's probably the worst thing you can do, apart from using it on your bed, lying on your bed, because the ventilation in a laptop is usually underneath, or at the very best it's on the side, either left or right side, and it just sucks in the fluff from your lap or from the bedclothes or whatever. So they're much better running on a hard surface where there's no fluff that can be sucked in. The screen is something which you just should never touch. The new LCD screens that we all use these days just do not like fingerprints. So you should. There is some shiny screens, and when you look at a screen, some of them are shiny and some of them are dull or matte. And I prefer the matte screens, but unfortunately, they hold fingerprints. So you don't want to touch them if you can possibly avoid it, because you'll never get that fingerprint grease off it. If it's a touch screen, that's fine. If it's a shiny screen, they're better from a fingerprint point of view, but they do have a reflection type problem where if you get the light in the wrong direction, it can be annoying, whereas the matte screens are better for reflecting, not reflecting light. You can use alcohol wipes, alcohol-free wipes, I should say, from a company called Fellows, and you can buy those in Officeworks. They're quite good to clean. I've used them many times to clean a badly fingerprinted screen. You might even need 2 goes to get it back to anything like as good as it was, but they never get rid of all of it. It'll always have some on it. So it's a shame that you can't. So the best thing is not to touch it. Just use a soft brush if you want to get the dust off it. DVD drives you don't need to do anything with, and you can't really do anything with. They cost between $25 and $40 and take a few minutes to replace. So there's nothing you need to do with that. Keyboards are always a problem because they get full of crumbs, and hopefully not coffee, but certainly crumbs and other bits fall down between the keys. Good idea to turn it over and just tap the corner on a hard surface, and that generally shakes out most of the crumbs and objects that have fallen between the keys. You can use a vacuum cleaner with a soft brush. But be careful, not to do that on a Lenovo laptop that has a little, it's a little lever that stands up between the keys with a red cap on it, and the red cap often ends up the vacuum cleaner. So either take that off first, or don't do it. Don't use a vacuum cleaner. Just use a brush. And not a good idea to use a vacuum cleaner when the machine's on, because it's pressing keys all over the place. You might get some funny problems coming out of that. You can use the alcohol-free wipes again on a keyboard to get some of the fingerprint deposit, the grease that comes out of it. Optional, a mouse, optical mouse. There's not much you can do. They're about $20. There's not a lot you can do other than check that it's not a build-up of fluff on the sliders. If you turn one over, you'll see there's usually 3 or 4 sliders that it moves around on the table with, and they often build up grime and fluff. And if you just clean those off, you'll find it moves much easier. You should use a mouse on a coloured surface, not self-coloured. Like the black or white mouse pads are not a good idea. A patterned one is better because the mouse movement is detected by the laser underneath it, reflection off the surface. And if the surface is single coloured, it doesn't get much signal back, because as you move it, it doesn't see any difference. When it's on a pattern surface, it'll work much better. And that's it. These are just the changes in as I've upped the versions of this presentation. So that's the end of the course. We've actually got to the end. So I hope you've enjoyed all that you've learned, hopefully. And because they're on YouTube, so you can play them as many times as you want. You can stop and start them and get the benefit out of it fully. So thanks for your attention.